In my past life, I participated in a rich, poor family swap show. My younger sister chose to swap with Henry Way and go to the city. But after the swap ended, she couldn't adapt to life in the mountain village, constantly crying for her city mom. Despite her usual academic excellence, she stubbornly dropped out of school to work. With the help of Henry Way's family, I went to college. My sister, having entered the workforce early, faded into obscurity under life's pressures. Later, at my wedding with Henry Way, my sister stabbed my neck with a fruit knife. She screamed hoarsely, accusing me. She hated that it wasn't me who went for the swap, nor me who dropped out. When I opened my eyes again, both my sister and I had returned to the day of the swap, just like in the past life. The show's director, Pa, and Ma stayed in the small West Room, talking for a full 2 hours. 2 hours later, Ma came out holding 2 straws. You're both girls, so don't say I'm favoring anyone. Whoever draws the longer straw gets to go to the city and broaden their horizons. I looked up dazedly and saw the grimy face of my 12-year-old sister, Sadie Yu, sitting across from me. Oh, right, I had been reborn. But these days, my memories kept circling back to the day I got married at 28, back to my wedding day, when Sadie Yu showed up in glamorous attire, only to slash my throat with a fruit knife. In the early February chill, Sadie still wore a short padded jacket with cotton stuffing poking from the cuffs, patched here and there with mismatched fabric scraps. Yet her young face still overlapped with the heavily made up one she would wear as an adult. It was as if I could see those desperate eyes again. Shannon, you should have been the one to swap places with Henry Way and live in the city. I should have stayed home, built a relationship with Henry, gotten into university, married into wealth. You were never as smart or as pretty as me. So why? The hatred in my sister's memory was so intense that even seeing her now, still innocent and unaware, felt piercing. In my past life, I could never understand. I loved Sadie so dearly. So why did she resent me so bitterly? Now, I have been reborn into the past, back to the pivotal moment she said would change our fate. Ma was urging us to draw straws. I lowered my head and hesitated, but Sadie reached out and pulled a straw from Ma's hand. Ma, before I could reach out, Sadie, you spoke up. Ma, mine is the short one, right? Let me stay and work by your side. And send sister to the city. Sister, you're going to the city to broaden your horizons. Aren't you happy? I suddenly looked up. No, this lifetime is different from the last. It wasn't until my death in my past life that I learned how much resentment my sister Sadie you held in her heart. Clearly, it was you who drew the long straw back then. Clearly, it should have been you and Henry Way swapping lives. Why did you yield to me? The show Life Swap became a massive hit when we were 10. How popular was it? Our small village was tucked deep in the mountains, and only 2 or 3 households in the entire village even had a television. Every day after school, I dragged Sadie Yu to my uncle's house to watch this variety show, clinging on despite my aunt's sarcastic remarks. Back then, we both dreamed of swapping lives with city kids, even if just for a month. I longed to see the city, to taste what a hamburger was like. Little did we know, that wish came true when Sadie Yu and I turned 12. That year, the show was in its 3rd season, and they picked our family. The show's director handed my parents 20,000 yuan as a recording fee. For our family, it was like a windfall. Plus, our child would get to live in the city for a while. If we could win the favor of the city couple and secure some support, it'd be an unexpected bonus. My pa and ma gladly agreed. But with 3 children in the family, my younger brother still in swaddling clothes, it became a dilemma. Who between Sadie Yu and me would swap with Henry Way to experience city life, and who would stay behind to help with farm work? In my past life, Ma also had a straws. Sadie Yu drew first, but before I could reveal the straw I'd drawn, she grabbed my hand. Sis, I've never been to the city. I want to see what a big city is like. So, it seems I'm not the only one who's been reborn. But Sadie, you probably hasn't realized I've been reborn too. She just tightened her grip on the straw. Elder sister, I know you've always wanted to see the city. This time, I'll let you have it. I remembered Sadie Yu's complaints to me before I died. At 28, she blamed all the failures in her life on that straw draw. She said if she had been the one to stay home, she could have nurtured a relationship with Henry Way. If she had stayed, she would have been the one to capture Henry Way's youthful heart. Then, just like he helped me, he would have persuaded his parents to support her, maybe even brought her to live in the city. Henry Way would have tutored her too, helping her improve her clumsy English, just as he did for me. In that case, she would have been the one to get into university, the one to secure a postgraduate recommendation, and the one to achieve academic success at a young age. She attributed all my accomplishments to Henry Way and was convinced that I had stolen her life. Hearing this, I initially intended to explain things to her, but she was so firmly convinced of her own assumptions that, upon rebirth, she couldn't wait to alter the decisions of her previous life. Recalling the chilling sensation at my throat back then, fine, I chose to respect Sadie Yu's fate. Well then, thank you, sister. And so, the decision to swap places with Henry Way was finalized. As I was packing before leaving for the city, the door suddenly knocked. It was Sadie Yu. She must have returned to this time during the lottery draw. No wonder reborn individuals are prone to exposure. At this age in her past life, she never had the habit of knocking before entering, perhaps relying on her youth. She didn't even bother to conceal it. Her face bore the sun, kissed, weathered tan from exposure to the elements. Yet it was now scrubbed clean. Sister, she said with a smile. Anyway, when you go to the city, people will buy you new clothes and shoes. Why not let me wear that windbreaker? The windbreaker was a gift from our cousin. She outgrew it after wearing it a few times, and it was still in perfect condition when she passed it to us. I'd always been reluctant to wear it. In my past life, Sadie Yu had also touched the pockets of the windbreaker and said, Sis, if I go to the city dressed too shabbily, people will look down on me. Could you let me have it? Later, she returned wearing glamorous new clothes. The windbreaker she'd promised to give back was long gone. And now, in this life, Sadie brought up the windbreaker again. I don't think it's because it's particularly precious or stylish. It's just, Sadie grasped my hand and said, Sis, we're having guests over tomorrow. That windbreaker is the only presentable piece of clothing we have to wear in front of them. Sadie's palm had a thin layer of calluses, but as she held my hand, I felt a damp, slippery sensation, like the touch of a cold, slithering snake. Sure. I calmly withdrew my hand. Sadie, you was eagerly anticipating Henry Way's arrival, rubbing her hands in excitement as she pinned all her hopes for a comeback on him. Watching her try on outfit after outfit, I opened my mouth several times, wanting to ask, have you never considered that my breakthrough back then wasn't because of Henry Way? But after a moment's thought, I closed my mouth again. After all, in my past life, it was Sadie Yu who killed me. Now reborn, she's still my biological sister. Without evidence of her crime, I can't go to the police. So I've chosen to let the grievances of the past life lie. But that doesn't mean we've reconciled, nor does it mean I'm obliged to offer her advice. I won't warn her that Henry Way is not someone to be trifled with, nor will I remind him that the reason Henry Way later spoke up for me and had his parents support me wasn't because we grew close through daily interactions. It was because I once saved his life, and that so-called life, saving favor wasn't exactly a pleasant experience. In my past life, I later stumbled upon this variety show online and watched what happened after Sadie went to the city. In her past life, the windbreaker on Sadie's body didn't help her hold her ground. Facing Father Way in his tailored suit and the young, beautiful Mother Way, Sadie bashfully stepped on her worn-out, threadbare cotton shoes. But Mother Way in the city took a liking to Sadie. Mother Way had always wanted a daughter, and Sadie, having grown up in a poor family, was exceptionally sensible. Pitiful Sadie in her tattered shoes instantly won her sympathy. Sadie experienced a completely different month of life in the city. Meanwhile, in that small mountain village, I nearly faced death. While Sadie, you eagerly awaited Henry Way's arrival, I boarded the program cruise car and headed to the airport. Sitting on the plane, I looked down from 10,000 meters high at the bustling traffic and towering skyscrapers. I should have felt intrigued and feigned surprise. But having seen it all in my past life, I couldn't feign surprise, just like how, standing before Henry's parents, I couldn't muster any inferiority complex, even compared to my past life as Sadie Yu. I was in a more destitute state now, but within this underage body resided a long, matured soul, not the timid little girl who once blushed merely at the sight of Henry Wei in fashionable clothes. Mother Wei was a sentimental woman. The moment she saw me, her eyes welled up with tears as she pulled me into an embrace. Sheng Sheng, Mother Wei gently stroked my head, saying, "You've been through so much. From now on, just call me Mother Wei." "All right," I softly replied. "Thank you, Auntie Song." Mother Wei's surname was Song, and she was quite an impressive, capable woman, but I was unwilling to call her Mother Wei. It wasn't that I held any grudge against her. Rather, I refused to trade my poverty and pitiable state for sympathy, using it to gain advantages from them. I needed to earn their respect through my own capabilities. I needed them to see my worth. What I truly lamented for Sadie Yu was that, from beginning to end, she believed there were only two paths she could take. One path was to stay at home and curry favor with Henry Wei. The other was to come to the city and win over Henry Wei's parents. In my past life, she came to this city but couldn't settle down at her parents' home in town. So, this time she decided to take my path first. But she never considered, since we've both been reborn, with decades of experience and wisdom gained, why would we still tread the old paths? Uncle Wei and Annie Song took me shopping for clothes, just as they did with Sadie Yu in my past life. They encouraged me to pick out outfits, preferably several sets. I recalled Sadie Yu from before. How did she handle it? Back then, she was visibly thrilled but forcefully restrained herself, taking only a set of autumn wear and a tracksuit before refusing to choose more. Even when Annie Song urged her to select additional pieces, she said, "These clothes are too expensive. Auntie, you work hard for your money. I can't accept your generosity." That's the reaction you'd expect from a child with decent character. So, in her past life, even though Sadie Yu said she didn't need other new clothes, Annie Song still bought her several extra sets. Sadie Yu was overwhelmingly touched, and Auntie Song repeatedly praised her for being sensible. But now, I directly picked out 2 sets of outerwear that fit and 2 sets of autumn clothes from the clothing rack. Auntie Song politely asked, "Sheng Sheng, are these 2 sets enough? I see you've chosen plain styles. Spring is here. How about Auntie buys you a little dress?" "Thank you, Auntie," I said seriously, "but that won't be necessary. Otherwise, I won't be able to pay you back when I leave." "Where would a little kid like you need to pay me back? Besides, Henry Wei is eating and staying at your house." I'm somewhat particular about beds. Right after being reborn, I couldn't sleep for 2 or 3 days in a row. It's still the same now. Lying in the room Auntie Song prepared for me, I tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep. So I quietly started planning what I should do during the remaining 30 days. In the middle of the night, I heard the telephone ring in the living room. Back then, many households still had landline phones, including the Wei family. Right after, I heard the sound of the master bedroom door opening, followed by footsteps and voices. "Hello, may I ask what this is about? He's just a troublemaker. Don't mind him. Let him throw his tantrum." "What? Hit someone? Who?" "Sadie Yu." It was Auntie Song on the phone. Unlike her patient and meticulous attitude toward me, her voice now was filled with impatience. That she mentioned must be Henry Wei. Henry Wei and I set off almost at the same time. So, by the time I arrived at the Wei household, he should have just reached my home. However, when I came, I brought almost nothing except a change of clothes and personal hygiene items. That's why Henry Wei's parents bought me quite a few things today. Arriving at this unfamiliar place, I was mostly on the receiving end. Henry Wei was different. Knowing he was going to stay in the countryside for a month, he brought 2 or 3 suitcases worth of belongings. The production team intended this as a test for him, to help him understand life's hardships. How could they allow him to bring these things? Game consoles were forbidden. Snacks were forbidden. So, what Henry Way felt more than anything was deprivation. He was never particularly gentle by nature, and being in an unfamiliar place without any sense of security made it almost impossible for him not to grow anxious. However, I never expected that instead of directing his anger at the production team, he would actually hit Sadie. How did I give birth to such a wretched creature? Please help me ask what the young lady wants as compensation. She wants nothing? Not seriously injured? Minor injuries? Does that mean he didn't hit her? If the young lady truly wants nothing, in that case, I'll transfer 5,000 yuan to the production team. Please pass it on to her. Asterisk, the call ends. Footsteps sound again. Asterisk, the master bedroom door clicks shut. After a moment, Auntie Song's deliberately hushed. Small complaints followed. It's all your fault. You never discipline him since he was little. He's always had a quick temper. And you even let him play games. Look how corrupted he is by gaming now. Hitting people is bad enough. But hitting a girl, don't you know what bullying the weak means? As Auntie Song complained, I dug up from my memories the image of that defiant-eyed youth from my past life. Strange. I was clearly wide awake at this moment, yet I soon fell asleep amidst Auntie Song's incessant grumbling. Early the next morning, Uncle Wei and Auntie Song had already gone out. The dining table was set with a lavish breakfast, and a note from them was stuck on the fridge. Sheng Sheng, Uncle and Annie have business to discuss today. In the afternoon, our assistant and the program crew will help you with school enrollment. When we return in the afternoon, Uncle and Auntie will celebrate your enrollment with you. It was phrased in a tone meant to soothe the child. The show's camerawoman was already seated at the dining table. Seeing me approach, she smiled and asked, heading to a new school today. Shannon, are you nervous? I shook my head. She then gave me a knowing smile, as if to say, I get it. Don't worry. I won't laugh at you. But I truly wasn't nervous. I roughly knew how a normal child should behave in this situation, but I wasn't sure I could fake it convincingly. Besides, I didn't want them to treat me like a child, so I didn't even bother pretending. After breakfast, I proactively washed the dishes clean. The production crew initially tried to help, but after I declined, they gathered around to film me working. We arrived at the elite school Henry Way previously attended around 9:30 a.m. The principal, hoping to leverage the show's publicity, cooperated fully with the filming. He smiled and handed over a few test papers. To better understand Shannon, use academic level, and arrange more suitable specialized instruction for her. We have a test paper here. Would you like to give it a try? Shannon Yu, Elite Academy specialty, is tailoring education to each student's abilities. Taking the test was arranged by both the program crew and the school, and it was meant to be one of my standout moments. Earlier, the program team investigated us and found that both Sadie Yu and I had excellent academic records. In my past life, when Sadie enrolled at this school, she also took a test, which helped build her image as a grateful a student. As for me, of course, I had no reason to refuse either. I took the test papers from the principal, skimmed through them, and noticed there was no English exam. Mountain Village elementary schools are short on resources. Though we studied English, there are hardly any English tests before middle school, so you can't expect our English to be all that strong. It was a minor detail, but the principal noticed, showing just how seriously he took this filming. I bent over the desk on the other side of the office and started writing. Little did I know I'd be at it for a full 3 hours. It wasn't because I was slow or didn't know the material. Instead, when I was halfway through, the principal would glance at the filled blanks in surprise, pull the test paper from under my hand, and replace it with another. He said, "Try this one," just like that. It happened 7 or 8 times. Finally, I completed a full test paper. Not because the principal didn't want to swap anymore, but because there were no higher difficulty spare test papers left in the office. The camerawoman nearby had already zoomed in on my test paper. "That's enough," the principal said excitedly. "We'll place you in the most outstanding class." But soon, he realized his slip of the tongue and quickly changed the subject. "Would you like to try an English test?" I gently pressed my hand on the test paper, and replied calmly yet firmly, "I'm truly sorry, but I haven't studied much English before." When I stepped out of the principal's office, I couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Last night, I had considered whether I should hold back while taking the test. But judging by the principal's attitude now, clearly performing better on the test would bring me more benefits than drawbacks, just like what happened to Sadie in her previous life. The school didn't have the kind of bullying scenario described in novels, where a top-performing rural female student transfers to a private school and gets mistreated. On the contrary, the students at this school were very kind. After the principal informed my homeroom teacher, my classmates even organized a welcome ceremony for me, a complete set of crisp, elegant school uniforms, clean and tidy classroom desks, enthusiastic and cheerful classmates, fragrant locked notebooks with scented pages. Compared to the stationery I used back in my hometown at this time in my previous life, I began to understand why Sadie later didn't want to go back home. Class interactions, interest-based activities. Even before school ended, I had already blended in with my classmates. On my way home, an enthusiastic classmate even invited me to visit their house. I shook my head and got into the car sent by Henry Way's parents. When I returned to the Way family home, I found that Henry's parents had already arrived. The table was filled with exquisite dishes, and they greeted me with warm smiles. "Shung Shung, come quick. Today, we're celebrating you joining a new class. How are you getting along with your classmates? Is anyone bullying you?" "We're getting along quite well." I put my backpack on the sofa, but they're all just being too considerate of me. I feel a bit embarrassed about it. It's just mutual kindness. Nothing to be embarrassed about. Uncle Way placed a chicken drumstick in my bowl. "If you feel awkward, you can go to the mall on Saturday to pick out some gifts and give them to the classmates who helped you on Monday. By the way, Shung Shung, which class were you assigned to?" It was just a casual question. Uncle Way probably didn't think much of it, because as soon as he finished speaking, he buried his head in his soup. "Class 3, grade 9, I said. "Uffed." He spat out a mouthful of soup. Andy Song, who was nearby, hurried to get him a tissue, but Uncle Way just held the tissue to his mouth, forgetting even to wipe, and just asked me, "You said you were assigned to where?" Even though the program team and I both explained and reassured him, Uncle Way still called the principal. Even so, Uncle Way said, "I still think it's a bit exaggerated. Only her English is significantly weak," the principal explained, "but she excels in all other aspects. If our school weren't a 9-year system, I might suggest she skip a grade. By the way, Mr. Way, Henry's father, sometime soon, I may need your help as a mediator to discuss Shannon Yu's schooling with the program team and her parents. The value of an academic prodigy versus a straight. A student is fundamentally different. Some things need not be spelled out. Old foxes like Uncle Way and the principal already understood each other perfectly." Hearing this, I also breathed a quiet sigh of relief. That evening, the phone in the living room rang once again. From Mother Way's tone, it seemed Henry had stirred up trouble on the other end. After Mother Way hung up and returned to the room, I once again overheard her whispering to Father Way. "Caused trouble again?" "Yes," insisting on coming back, wanting to talk to me for a bit. Of course, I didn't entertain him. A real man needs to go through more hardships. What's the point of always threatening to go home? Look at Shannon Yu. Only then did I realize that a child from the mountain village, with such limited educational resources, could achieve such high grades. Why can't Henry Way do the same? Why can't he focus on his studies like Shannon? If only we had given birth to Shannon instead. Yesterday, I slept soundly listening to Annie Song's voice. But today, in the same bed, with the same voice, I just couldn't fall asleep. Memories began to flash through my mind. Sadie, you had always thought that the turning point in her fate was that lottery draw. It was because I stayed home, met Henry Way, who came to live in the Gulch, and sparked something during that whole month together that we ended up together later. But she didn't know, in my past life, it's true that Henry Way and I became lovers. But back then, I was only 12, and Henry Way was just 13. One of us only cared about getting enough to eat. The other was in the midst of teenage rebellion. How could sparks of romance possibly fly between us? In truth, Henry Way and I back then were more like kindred spirits in shared hardship. Or perhaps we only ever had that one fleeting moment as storyteller and listener. When Henry Way first arrived at my home, our relationship wasn't exactly smooth. My memory of our first meeting is that evening when the film crew crowded the doorway, blocking the path of a tall, sharp-edged young man. Henry Way was strikingly handsome. As the saying goes, a fair complexion hides a multitude of flaws. A city-bred teenager like him, standing outside the door, was a sight to behold. What's more, Henry Way had fine features and an exceptional aura. He drew quite a crowd of curious villagers, but any good impression his looks might have made was utterly ruined by his terrible temper. His suitcase lay open before him, filled haphazardly with a game console, potato chips, and all sorts of other things. Inside the side pocket of the suitcase was a red envelope containing a stack of cash. None of these things can be brought along, the program director said. Are you here for rehabilitation or for a vacation? The director took items out of his suitcase one by one. At first, when the director used the word rehabilitation, Henry Way's face just darkened slightly. As more and more items were taken away, I saw his expression grow, increasingly grim, as if he were about to explode at any moment. I knew this was the person who would be staying at my house for a month. In that moment, I just felt that this person might not be easy to get along with. Then the director took away Henry's game console. Henry's chest heaved violently a couple of times. His face was livid, and I thought he was about to punch the director, but he turned and stormed off. I quit. The teenager's legs were long, and his steps were swift. The next moment, the director jogged after him. I later found out that the director threatened to call Henry's parents right away, which made the young man reluctantly return to continue filming. Back then, I didn't understand his reluctant compromise at all. I only remember the cold glance the young man threw my way as he handed his suitcase to the production crew and stepped into our courtyard. Later, Henry Way and I didn't exactly get along well. He was a city-bred young master, raised in privilege, seeing us use pig feed to wash dishes. He thought our home was unhygienic. Woken by my brother's crying, he'd lose his temper without hesitation. When he needed a notebook for class and had none, I kindly lent him one of my exercise books. He tossed it aside before even finishing one side, sent to the fields to pull weeds. He lasted just one noon before sunburn peeled his skin. F***. He cursed without hiding it from me. I must be insane to join this damn show. The real turning point in our relationship came when the crew assigned me to take him cutting pig feed. I held a sickle, slowly slicing through the vines blocking our path. The boy trailed behind me, a basket on his back, and a blade of foxtail grass dangling from his mouth. All casual arrogance. Stop humming. I'll hum if I want. You're even policing my humming while walking? Stop that grumbling. It sounds awful. Do you even have any taste? What do you mean awful? The mountain path was rugged. Some sections were wider, enough for a tricycle to pass through. Other parts were extremely narrow, barely wide enough for one person to squeeze through. Having grown up here, I was used to climbing mountains and trees, so navigating these single-person paths didn't faze me at all. But it never occurred to me that city folks weren't like this. Henry Way wasn't like this. He'd never walked such mountain paths before, and he had acrophobia. While focused on humming earlier, it hadn't seemed like a big deal. But when he glanced around, Henry falling wasn't really unexpected. It was also coincidental. The moment he slipped, I instinctively grabbed him. It was a relatively gentle cliff. Henry wasn't completely dangling in midair, but clinging to a 70-degree slope with a constant risk of sliding further was terrifying. I held onto his arm tightly. The production crew, who had been trailing behind us, finally caught on and rushed forward. But in the moment before the crew rushed over, I realized he was prying my fingers open. "Let go," he whispered. "Are you insane?" I instinctively gripped tighter. "Stop prying. Stop. If you die like this, I'll be labeled a murderer." Henry Way's face flushed red, but he finally stopped struggling. Soon after, The crew swarmed in and rescued him. Later, considering the potential backlash, the footage of Henry nearly slipping off the cliff was cut from the final edit. But that evening, as we sat on a giant rock by the path, watching the sun dip behind the mountains, his attempt to pry my fingers became our unspoken secret. Having weathered a life and death ordeal together, we grew closer, so much so that when I later sought his help with school issues, he extended a helping hand without hesitation. Back then, I couldn't understand why his will to live seemed so faint. It wasn't until much later, after we got in together, that we accidentally revisited the topic. Was it just because they wouldn't answer your phone that day? Yes. Henry Way nodded, his expression somber, all because they hadn't answered my call that day. The grown Henry Way had become powerful and capable of anything. Yet when speaking of his parents, I could still glimpse the shadow of that boy, like a young beast trapped in a sack, thrashing about with no way out. Now back in my youth, I reminisced about the Henry Way I hadn't yet met in this lifetime. Next door, Auntie Song's complaints continued. My expectations aren't high. Can't he just be a bit more sensible? They say poor children mature early. Do you think we've spoiled him too much? What's with all the drama? Haven't we given him enough? What more do parents need to do? Offer him our hearts, and he'd still refuse. The next morning, Uncle and Annie Way were again not home, with no classes on Saturday. After breakfast, I simply called Annie Way. Clack, clack, clack. The sound of mahjong tiles clashing came through. Is that Sheng Sheng? Auntie Way's voice came through. Sorry about this. Sheng Sheng. Auntie has some business to discuss today, so I won't be able to keep you company. How about Annie calls Uncle's assistant and asks him to take you to the amusement park? A child who just arrived in the city must love amusement parks. Unfortunately, I'm no longer a child. So, I shook my head. The next second, I realized Annie Song on the other end of the phone couldn't see me. Auntie, I don't want to go to the amusement park. I noticed there's a computer at home. May I use it? As soon as I finished speaking, there was an odd pause on the other end. After what felt like ages, I finally heard Annie Song's voice again. That computer has always been for Henry Way to play games on. Sheng Sheng, what are you doing on the computer? Don't tell me you're thinking about playing games too? Andy heard. You're new here and everything seems exciting, but I need to warn you. You've got to keep yourself in check. Some things are good, but some things are. I don't know how long Annie Song went on like that. After hanging up, I still went into the study. Uncle Way didn't have a habit of working from home, so this study was essentially prepared solely for Henry Way. I saw all kinds of Legos and figurines in the study, as well as complete sets of manga on the bookshelf. Each of these items was undoubtedly worth a fortune. If it were me from my previous life at this time, seeing these things and knowing their value, I would probably only envy Henry Way. But now, I feel as if a heavy stone is pressing on my heart, suffocating and burdensome. I used the computer to look up all the competitions I could sign up for this month and felt confident about participating in. 1 month was too short, and since I had no talent for business, I could only pin my hopes of making money and increasing my value on these contests. I organized these competitions into a table, copied them into my notebook, and planned to discuss them with my homeroom teacher on Monday. Having lived a second life, I am not ashamed to use the knowledge from my previous existence to create better conditions for myself now, helping me bypass the difficult paths. Perhaps there are even quicker ways. Stocks, lotteries, cryptocurrencies. But in my past life, I only knew how to bury myself in studies. I neither remember the key moments of their rises and falls, nor do I have any capital to start with. So, even when it comes to making money, it seems I can only resort to some clumsy methods. Gathering online information a decade ago was no easier than it is 10 years later. I spent a very long time searching for these details. As I shut down the computer, I casually glanced aside and noticed a desk calendar on the table with a date circled and a small smiling face drawn beside it. March 8th, Mother's Day. If I remember correctly, it was also the day in my past life when Henry Way and I want to cut pig feet together, and he nearly slipped off a cliff. Henry Wei's parents returned home at 11 o'clock in the evening. The scent of Annie Song's perfume had mostly faded, and Uncle Wei looked somewhat weary, but upon seeing me, he still walked over and asked with a smile, "Sheng Sheng, I heard you were playing on the computer at home today. How was it?" I turned to pull a notebook from my backpack. Before I could take out the notebook, Uncle Wei spoke again. "Sheng Sheng, Uncle knows you've just arrived in the city and are curious about everything here, including city friends, all the facilities, and various things to play with. You must have heard about computer games from your classmates, right?" The notebook I was about to take out slipped right back into my backpack. Uncle Wei sighed with deep concern. "Since you're here for the exchange program, you must have heard about Uncle Wei's son. Henry Wei used to have excellent grades when he was younger, until he got exposed to computers and became addicted to computer games. His grades dropped, and he started becoming rebellious. Before, when I scolded him, he would obediently listen, but after playing computer games, he learned to talk back to me. The time we spent together as father and son grew shorter, and misunderstandings deepened. He became cold-blooded, emotionless, and ungrateful. That's why I chose to sign him up for this family exchange reality show. Sheng Sheng, you're different from him. You're still a good kid, untouched by the corruption of games. Promise Uncle you won't follow Henry Wei's path, okay?" I looked at Uncle Wei, listening as he piled words like cold-blooded, emotionless, and ungrateful onto Henry Wei's head. What flashed through my mind was the smiling face drawn in that tiny square centimeter blank space on the calendar for March 8th. Truthfully, I know that since I'm now living with the Wei family, it's best to behave as obediently as possible. Some words are better left unsaid, some matters better left unattended. Besides, even if I did intervene, it wouldn't make a difference. But thinking of Henry Wei's lonely face under the sunset in my past life, I couldn't hold back and took out the notebook I'd been writing in that afternoon from my backpack. "Uncle Wei," I said, "you've misunderstood." The notebook was densely filled with information about various competitions. I wasn't playing games this afternoon. I was just taking notes. A look of apology crossed his face for having misunderstood me, or perhaps when he heard I was using the computer, his first thought was that I was gaming. He didn't even bother to verify, rushing to lecture me, eager to straighten out what he thought was a wayward sapling. Uncle Wei apologized to me, but I shook my head. "Because I'm not your child. You have extra patience with me, but you weren't even willing to wait and hear what I had to say." "What about Henry Wei? When he was playing games, did you ever listen to his explanations? Did you hear him talk about his hobbies, his dreams? Did you listen to him explain his loneliness, his achievements?" Henry Wei later became an exceptionally outstanding esports player, even though, as a teenager, he lived in an environment not particularly suited for esports. An adult always finds it hard to bear being lectured by a child, especially an adult who rarely gives children an equal opportunity to communicate. What kind of expectations can you have for a parent who sends their child to a reality show, hoping to reshape their personality by making them suffer? I'm not saying Uncle Wei is a bad person. He is wealthy, generous, even a good entrepreneur, and a relatively conscientious boss. He just isn't a very qualified father. Our discussion ended on such an unpleasant note. Uncle Wei seemed to think that Henry Wei and I were cut from the same cloth. Outwardly well behaved, but inherently restless at heart. So, in the following days, he avoided running into me. Originally, I could only occasionally see them when they returned from work each night, but with his deliberate avoidance, even that became difficult. Andy Song, however, was overjoyed after the homeroom teacher called to say my English grades had improved dramatically, hugging and kissing my cheeks several times in excitement. "So smart, so adorable. Sheng Sheng, how I wish I had a daughter instead of a son." In this lifetime, I took the initiative to call her Annie Song, but in the previous life, Sadie Yu called her mother Wei. I could well imagine how Sadie Yu, who rarely received hugs from her own mother back home, must have felt hearing Auntie Song's words. Moreover, the Sadie Yu who came to the Wei family in her past life was perfectly well behaved, innocent, sincere, honest, warm, and deeply grateful. Sadie, you was also quite favored by Uncle Wei. It truly was a perfect family, but in this life, it is I who came to the Wei family. So, after Annie Song's excitement subsided, I took a slight step back and said, Annie Song, tomorrow is Women's Day. Is there any gift you like? Women's Day is a major holiday. I should probably call my mom tomorrow. Will you be available to take Henry Wei's call tomorrow? Auntie Song and Uncle Wei always seem to be swamped, too busy to answer their phones. Even the production crew mostly reaches out to them around midnight. I only recently learned from their executive assistant that the Wei parents have been coming home at night lately because the production team has filming scheduled. Normally, they rarely come back, even once a week. Auntie Song's smile tightened slightly. Sheng, do you feel we haven't spent enough time with you? Or are you implying that Henry Wei, lacking family care, is pitiable? I always thought you were a sensible child, but perhaps due to your age, you're overly sympathizing with Henry's perspective? Then, Auntie, will you make time to call Henry or answer his calls? Yes. I'll answer. On the eve of Mother's Day, after already offending Uncle Wei, I now managed to upset Annie Song too, but it doesn't seem to matter much. In my past life, with Henry Wei's help, his parents funded my education expenses, and I truly am grateful to them. But this gratitude doesn't mean I think they were without fault. Or perhaps, because of this gratitude, I couldn't help but want to meddle a little more. On Women's Day, I sold the last carnation from my stock at the school gate, just as I was returning the flower bucket to the florist. The production crew suddenly received a call. Sheng, the female camera pressed her lips together. We have to end the exchange now. Why? Henry Wei had an accident. He's injured. Uncle Wei and Auntie Song will go back with you. The camera press didn't specify what kind of injury Henry had sustained, but judging from her expression, it seemed fairly serious. When we returned to the Wei residence, Annie Song and Uncle Wei had finally made time to sit together in the living room. Auntie Song's eyes were red-rimmed. Seeing me return, she said, Sheng, quickly pack your things. We're preparing to go back to your home. I don't have much to pack. I fetched a travel bag from the bedroom. I'm ready to go back anytime. The car traveled along the road, no different from the journey here. However, my state of mind had undergone a tremendous shift. With my head bowed, I kept recalling Henry Wei's profile against the sunset, and couldn't help asking Annie Song, Auntie, did you get any calls from Henry Wei today? I knew this wasn't the time to dwell on such matters. Annie Song gazed out the window without speaking. Fortunately, Henry Wei only suffered a simple fracture. It was indeed a steep slope, but though he fell quickly, he managed to grab onto a slanting sapling in time, preventing further descent. Still, his arm was broken, and his face was scratched by several branches. The facial scratches wouldn't leave scars, and the bone would heal with time. But for the near future, he likely wouldn't be able to continue filming with the program crew. When Henry Wei's parents and I entered the county hospital, Henry Wei was resting in bed, with Sadie sitting beside him, watching his foredrip. She seemed utterly exhausted, her head nodding drowsily. I keenly noticed that Sadie had lost a significant amount of weight. The sound of footsteps woke both of them. Henry Wei turned away upon seeing the newcomers, unwilling to look at them. Meanwhile, Sadie stood up when she saw me. She glanced at Henry's parents, nodded to them, then approached me. Shannon, we need to have a proper talk. We went together to the hospital stairwell. She lowered her voice. Shannon, you've also been reborn, haven't you? You knew Henry would accidentally slip while cutting pig feed. That's why you warned me not to take him. Right. Yesterday morning, after much thought, I borrowed a phone from the camera crew and called home, using the excuse of having something to tell Sadie to speak with her privately. Being thousands of miles away, yet predicting the program would send them to cut pig feed undoubtedly confirmed my rebirth. But I wasn't afraid of Sadie knowing. So, Sadie, gritted her teeth. You knew I wanted to switch with you. You knew I planned to stay home and pursue Henry Wei. Why didn't you stop me? Are you giving Henry Wei up to me? Or are you just watching me make a fool of myself? Unconsciously, Sadie Yu's voice rose a bit before she quickly lowered it again. Did something funny happen between you two? I asked tentatively. What? Did Henry Way embarrass you? Did the cameras catch it? Is it going to be included in the final cut of the show? Sadie Yu's face instantly turned green. Strange. When I left the Gulch for the city, my feelings toward her were still quite complex. I hated her, and I didn't understand. I hated that in my past life, despite how much I cherished her, she chose to kill me. I couldn't understand why. When her life turned out that way in my past life, clearly having nothing to do with me, she chose to hurt me. But now, those emotions have suddenly faded away. It's not that I no longer hate her, but with that confusion resolved, amidst the complex feelings, there's also a subtle sense of sympathy and pity. Henry Way isn't some object. There's no giving him up to speak of. I said, you just got a chance to stay at home and spend time with him. How? Is that me giving it to you? And does spending time together guarantee you'll end up together? Looking at how much thinner she'd grown in such a short time, and her weary complexion, I don't believe she and Henry Way got along very happily. And the teenage Henry Way wasn't exactly easy to get along with either. Even though Henry Way and I ended up together later, in love, what we fell for were each other's matured souls. I might pity his younger self. I might pay extra attention to the boy he once was, but I would never fall in love with that younger version of him. Besides, I said, I thought since you were reborn, you'd be rushing to go to the city. After all, even with the advantage of rebirth, how much can a 12-year-old girl really accomplish out here in the Gulch? In her past life, Sadie, you didn't have it easy, but she was great at hustling, dabbling in stocks, investments, business, even opening shops. If she chose to use this month to go out into the world, even as a minor, even if she couldn't make big money, she could still lay the groundwork for her future. Even if she felt she had no real skills to speak of, she could have used her knowledge of future events to negotiate with the Way family. Back and forth, she would have made others recognize her value. Even if she feared exposing her identity as a reincarnator, she could have retraced her past life's path, built a genuine bond with the Way couple, and seen if they were willing to fund her education, allowing her to change her life through learning. Yet among all these options, she chose the absolute worst one. She chose to cultivate feelings with Henry Way, secure him first, and wait over a decade to become Mrs. Gu. She attributed all my achievements to Henry Way. I laid this out for her, but she only sneered in response. Shannon, you know Henry Way is a lunatic. That's why you agreed to let me stay in the house. If you had a better way, why didn't you say so earlier? Now you come back, pretending to care, saying I chose the worst path. Do you have any idea what I've been through these past 2 weeks? This godforsaken place. The Gulch has nothing. No TV. No games. I've been eating sweet potato noodles every day, farting with every step, for over 10 days straight. Not a single bite of meat. My mouth so bland I could spit feathers. My toothbrush is worn to bristles, and Ma won't buy me a new one. Jess coddles her precious golden boy all day. I feed the pigs. I wash the dishes, weeding until I get dizzy just standing up. I saved a piece of dried sweet potato for Henry Way, and he tossed it away without even looking. Said he'd rather die than eat anything from our house. I tried comforting him, urging him to listen to his parents, and he straight up called me crazy. Right, Sadie, you had forgotten. Her memories frozen at age 28, accustomed to city life. She was far more pampered than Henry Way, who'd come here for reform. It was hard to say whether the real reform was happening to Henry Way or to her. You accuse me of repaying kindness with betrayal, but do you really think you're any better? If you truly cared about me, would you have stood by and watched me choose to stay home without stopping me? Stop me from what? I asked coldly. So you could slit my throat again a decade later? Sadie, have you forgotten? In our past life, you were the one who killed me. Even if we were once the closest of sisters, we are now sworn enemies. Sadie, you instantly froze like a rigid puppet. Sadie, there are some things I've wanted to tell you since our past life. I called out to her as she stiffly turned away. In this lifetime, It was your own choice. You drew the lot and chose to stay home. Don't blame me. In our past life, it was you who begged me to give you the chance to go to the city. Don't blame me for that either. You resent me for stealing your life. But do you remember how much Henry Way's parents adored you in our past life? Though they didn't keep you in the city. When they sent you home, they promised to sponsor both of us sisters and help us through college. In that past life, Sadie Yu's life could have been even more successful than mine. When Henry Way returned home, his parents personally came to our house, ready to sponsor both of us. But Sadie, you could do nothing but cry. She wept over why her city mother didn't want her anymore. The transition from rural life to the city, only to suddenly return to the countryside, left her feeling a tremendous sense of dislocation. She brought back beautiful dresses, yet discarded the trench coat she had worn when she left. She went to school with various notebooks, boasting to her classmates about the experiences she gained in the city. She lavishly treated her classmates to snacks, spent all her pocket money, and then sheepishly borrowed money from me. Naturally, she didn't dare ask her parents for pocket money, fearing they would hit her. She began to frequently zone out in class, stopped working diligently, and even draped a shirt over herself while weeding in the fields. In the sweltering heat of May, she said she was afraid the sun would darken her skin and cause freckles. She would run to the village's only small shop to call the Way family. "Mom, Dad, please, take me back home." After the Way parents rejected her pleas several times, she finally gave up hope and any motivation to study. She, who once had better grades than me, saw her academic performance plummet. Her mind no longer focused in class. She began to curse, ranting about why Henry Way was born with everything while she was doomed to toil in the fields. Back then, her curses were directed at Henry Way and his parents, not at me. Later, she made up her mind, dropped out of school, and followed her cousin to work in the county town. The county wasn't as developed as the city where the Way family lived, but at least it wasn't like the village where farm work was constant. She no longer had to face the monotonous classroom and endless exercises every day. She told me, "Don't blame me for dropping out. Look, people in the city get a well-rounded education, while our village only cares about studying and exams. Classes were too dull. How can you blame me for quitting?" I tried to stop her, but it was no use. The Way family support for us sisters was originally given for her sake. So, upon hearing she had withdrawn from school, they withdrew their funding. I begged her, "Let's finish high school together. Help me out, and I'll earn my own way through college." But she couldn't understand why I wanted to study. "Sis, it's because you haven't seen the world outside, haven't witnessed the luxurious lives of the wealthy out there. Pa and Ma stopped wanting us to study long ago." So, when she decided to drop out, she planned to send me out too, to work in a shop for someone. 9-year compulsory education in the countryside back then. Any excuse could easily bypass it. With no other options, I had to find the number Henry Way left me and called him. "Henry Way, didn't you say you owe me your life? I beg you, please help me." Later, how I managed to regain the Way family support, how I struggled bit by bit, how I escaped the mountains and got into university. None of that needs detailed recounting. Later, Henry Way and I met again in City C. I went to watch his match, and after retiring, he came to study at my university. Back and forth, we ended up together. The person Sadie you resented shifted from Henry Way and his parents to me. Why? We're twins. Why did I end up like this while you gained both career success and love? But was she really that miserable back then? I used my saved manuscript earnings to open a shop for her. Though it wasn't wildly successful, the shop's revenue could already cover her daily expenses. She had 2 relationships, perhaps not with the best outcomes, but they were genuine and heartfelt. And at 28, she was in her 3rd relationship. If all went well, they would likely marry. "Sadie you," I asked her, "when you rushed over that day saying I owed you, tell me, what exactly do I owe you? And who owes me?" Sadie, you glared at me fiercely, but her tears fell faster than her anger. "Then who owes me? Why did I end up in this state?" After our conversation that day, Sadie you left the hospital. She no longer stayed by Henry Way's side, nor did she try to please his parents anymore. When I entered Henry Way's hospital room, the Way family had finished talking, yet between them, there still seemed to be a thick layer of ice. But all of this had nothing to do with me anymore. The exchange was about to end, and my interactions with them would become fewer and fewer. And I believed that in my past life, Henry Way had ultimately managed his relationships with them well. In this life, Henry Way could do it too. Henry Way's injuries weren't suitable for moving yet. So Uncle Way and Annie Song chose to stay in the county town for a couple of days. Now, they finally had some free time. Shung Shung, if you're busy, you can head home first. We'll take care of Henry Way here. Once Henry Way is better, we'll go back directly. When I returned to Mountain Village, Uncle Way hurried out after me. He told me that if I didn't mind, he would sponsor me. In a few days, he'd ask the program team to handle the paperwork and then bring me back to Elite Academy to study. I shook my head. No need. Uncle Way, I've already spoken with the principal. In a couple of days, someone should come to my home to discuss it. The scholarship the principal offered is quite generous. Oh, I just remembered something. If possible, would you consider sponsoring Sadie? If she applies herself to her studies, she could get into a good school and repay you someday. If she studies hard, Sadie, you should be able to get into a good school. After all, back then, she was much smarter than me. As for Henry Way, when I left, he was still looking at me with unfamiliar eyes. In this lifetime, when he came to the mountain village, Sadie was by his side, so it's only natural he doesn't recognize me. But it doesn't matter. I'll work just as hard as I did in my past life, and he, too, will break free from his shackles. Just like before, we will meet again. Back in the village, I found Sadie already at home. As expected, she was lying on the bed, her head buried under the quilt. Outside, Ma and Pa were scolding her, berating her for being so lazy now, calling her a young lady's body with a servant's fate. Sadie, I pulled back the quilt. Since you claim I stole your life in our past life, in this lifetime, would you be willing to walk the path I walked in my past life? Study hard. Keep your feet on the ground. Sadie learned that the Way family would still sponsor her and fell silent for a long time. Was I wrong? She asked me. Yes, you were wrong, I said. Whether in your past life or this one, you were completely mistaken. Truthfully, after this lifetime, I can empathize with Sadie to some extent. Suddenly moving from a barren countryside to a bustling city, she, who once didn't get a single yuan in pocket money for a month and only dared to spend 5 cents on a tiny ice pop, now saw other kids' parents handing out 100 yuan at a time in the city. Her own mother only had eyes for her younger brother, making her do this and that. Yet other mothers had only one child, calling her sweetie and darling, saying, I wish I'd had a daughter, not a son. Sadie, if only you were my daughter. At 12 years old, her worldview, not yet fully formed, was hit with a massive shock. I thought I had gained a good mother, only to be abandoned again. I deeply regret that in my past life, as a 12-year-old, I didn't pay enough attention to Sadie's changes. I also regret not insisting that she continue her education. Back then, I hadn't yet formed a complete sense of self, let alone been able to guide her when she felt lost. Sadie, I said, I'm sorry. I should have cared more about you in our past life. But none of this justifies Sadie's resentment toward me, nor does it justify her claim that I stole her life. My life has always been mine alone, firmly in my own hands. As for Sadie, her life went off course, took wrong turns, and step by step, she lost her way back entirely. Shannon, Sadie cried, her face streaked with tears and mucus. Shannon, she didn't say anything else, just kept calling my name. Don't thank me, I said. I haven't forgiven you. It's only because, in this life, there's no evidence that you killed me. If it were our past life, I wouldn't hesitate to call the police. Moreover, our chances to meet will become fewer and fewer. I've reached an agreement with the principal of Elite Academy. I'll leave my hometown to study there. As for you, Sadie, your life is in your hands now. You can see for yourself what kind of life you'll make. That's easy to say, but I know it will be very, very difficult for Sadie Yu to continue studying and get into a good university. Being reborn doesn't solve everything. A lack of brains won't turn into smarts, and low intelligence won't become high IQ. A chaotic family in a past life won't magically become harmonious just because of a rebirth. Apart from some foreknowledge, rebirth can actually be a disadvantage at other times. Accustomed to social life, can one readjust to 9 years of compulsory education, used to future conveniences? Can one adapt to weeding fields and washing dishes with leftover water? But all this has nothing to do with me anymore. I went to elite academy. Even with memories of my past life, I still didn't dare slack off and even study harder. So, I skipped a grade and started preparing for more advanced studies ahead of time. During that period, I visited the Wei family to see Henry's parents. I always brought gifts each time I went. I rarely ran into Henry Wei, but from what his parents said, they still couldn't persuade him. He ended up pursuing a career in esports. Sometimes I wondered. Uncle Wei said, "Sometimes I think about what you said." Which part? Was it about spending more time with him, or listening to him more? Though countless words flashed through my mind, I still didn't respond to them. Later, Henry Wei and I still ended up together. Funny enough, what brought us together was Henry getting into the same school as me after he retired from esports. He rented a small place off campus. His parents called and asked if we could look out for each other. Just like in my past life, Henry and I got married when I was 28. Only this time, I didn't invite Sadie Yu to the wedding. When my parents came for the ceremony, she tactfully stayed away. Over the years, news of her would occasionally reach my ears. "Sadie, you dropped out of school midway, went out to work, got scammed in investments, had her money transferred to some unknown bank card. Her life seemed even worse than in her previous lifetime. Rebirth seemed to bring her more disadvantages than benefits. In her past life, she dabbled in stocks and investments. With experience from that lifetime, she was convinced she could dominate the stock market with ease. But how did it go? In something as volatile as that, even the slightest misstep could wipe her out completely. After we got married in this life, we soon had our own child and built our own little family. We didn't pour all our energy solely into our child, but we did our best to give them a better life and more love. Later, Henry Wei invested in his own esports club, guiding young players along the rocky path he once stumbled through himself. As for me, I sponsored many children from mountainous regions. I helped them attend school, enrich their inner worlds, and broaden their horizons. When we learned of Sadie Yu's passing, Henry Wei and I were only in our 40s. Both Sadie Yu and I had been reborn into the past. Yet in this lifetime, she left before me. In the end, Henry Wei and I grew old together and passed away in our sleep. When I woke up, I found myself in a hospital room. Everything before my eyes was white. Henry Wei was still wearing his wrinkled groom suit. His face was covered in stubble. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. Sheng Sheng, you're all right. He buried his head in my chest, on the verge of tears. The doctors said it was thanks to the timely help from a medical student attending my wedding, and the swift emergency treatment that saved my life. After I had recovered a bit, Ma knocked on my hospital room door. "Sheng Sheng, Sadie is still your sister after all." My vocal cords were somewhat damaged and would need a long time to heal. So, I typed a line on my phone. "Handle it as it should be handled. I won't sign any letter of forgiveness." I knew that after the swap, she witnessed the city's prosperity. Her mind became unsettled, and it irreparably damaged her beliefs and values. But I also said, that's no excuse for her to hurt me. If in my past life, I had evidence of her harming me, I would have definitely called the police. Without a second of hesitation,